Good morning. I am immensely honored to be before all you distinguished regional and worldwide activists for human rights, who, like I, believe that even though the fight for democracy is a lifelong task, it is necessary to take action so that our children and grandchildren can live in a better world. I, as a student movement, the Venezuelan student movement, understand that there are quicker and easier paths to accomplish this objective, but there are none as long-lasting as the objectives reached through the peaceful means and the respect of the law. My name is Diego Scharifker. I'm 20 years old, and I'm currently the youngest president of law school student government in the history of my university, the Universidad Central de Venezuela. Maybe I will not be as interested in politics and the defense of human rights if I wasn't reminded every day that how fragile our democracy is due to persecutions made by the government. The events written in our current history pressure us to realize that it is our turn to take on that lifelong task in the fight for democracy. And now we have a blank page to write the future of our own country. For a generation of students no older than 25 years, this is a huge responsibility. But we are confident that in the fight for democracy and freedom, it is not the age that defines our capabilities, but our understanding that we are being robbed of a future we deserve. Our spirit for change makes us not afraid to take risks, to accomplish our goals, and dream for a better country. Historically, the student movement has provoked great changes in Venezuela. The generation of 1928 was the force necessary to awaken the democratic fiber in the Venezuelan citizen against the bloody and violent government of Juan Vicente Gómez, who with an iron fist governed Venezuela for over 30 years, persecuting those who thought differently. The generation of 1957 had the responsibility of ending Venezuela's last formal dictatorship of General Marcos Pérez Jiménez, who even though brought progress and development to the country, systematically violated human rights and the liberties established in the Constitution. After this overthrow, General Marcos Pérez Jiménez saw himself obliged to escape the country towards Spain, and Venezuela lived 40 years of democracy, which represented a different beacon of light compared to dictatorships in South America during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. My participation in the student movement started with the generation of 2007, when I was a high school student and president of the National Federation of High School Students. We surged over 3 years ago as a reaction to the closure of the TV channel RCTV, or RCTV, that served as one of the 2 portals that allowed dissidents of the government to express their points of view. The student movement did not surge as a movement against the government or against President Chavez, but in defense of fundamental rights and the principles of freedom and democracy. Due to our non-partisan stance, the student movement has been able to gain immense credibility throughout Venezuelan society and has played an important role in the electoral processes where President Hugo Chavez has tried to democratically impose a totalitarian regime in Venezuela, similar to Hitler's use of democracy as a vehicle to rise to power and later destroy it. In 2008, the student movement was a decisive force in the campaign to reject the constitutional reform proposed by President Chavez, both by playing an active role during the campaign and as observers during the elections. Now, in 2010, we have denominated ourselves the bicentenary generation, because on April 19th, we will be celebrating 200 years of the independence of my country from the Spanish crown. We are now the ones that are in charge of the development of the movement and establishing the strategies to accomplish our goals. Fortunately, or unfortunately, the Venezuela of 2010 is completely different from the Venezuela of 2007. While in 2007, the world economy was still booming and oil prices were record high, the Venezuela of 2010 doesn't see the light at the end of the recession tunnel that is affecting us. Slowly but surely, social issues are starting to exacerbate. The bicentenary generation resurges with greater force, as with a deja vu, with the new closure of RCTV by the government in January 2010. Except that now we're not protesting for intangible ideas, or not protesting only for intangible ideas such as democracy and liberty, but also against the social problems affecting us daily, which are the rationing of water, the rationing of electricity, and the high rates of insecurity, or high rates of crime. The 3 issues affecting the basic rights to a decent quality of life expected from a rich and socially cautious government. Baseball is our national sport, and one all Venezuelans relate to with passion. According to baseball rules, 3 strikes and you're struck out, or in Spanish, you're ponchado. So we have used this popular expression then to denominate each social issue as a strike, and then the phrase, 1, 2, 3, Chávez está ponchado, or 1, 2, 3, Chávez is struck out. We have risen consciousness among all Venezuelans of the responsibility the government has in resolving this issue. This was in the stadium that is inside of the university where I study, of the Universidad Central de Venezuela, and we were brutally attacked by the police once we took out that cloth that says "Está ponchado," because apparently the president was there in the stadium, so he didn't want anyone protesting in the stadium while he was watching the baseball game. Since January, we have organized over 20 protests, and all of them have ended with the police dispersing us with rubber bullets and gas bombs. The physical attacks are not only committed by the police forces, but we are also constantly attacked by Chavez supporters inside and outside our universities. That is a weapon the police are now using in Venezuela. In theory, it's used just to separate barricades when they're on fire. But the police now use it to throw it towards the students, try to catch them by their clothes, and get them closer so they can take them and detain them in jail. During the week following the closure of RCTV, most students protested peacefully in front of their universities, chanting our motto and giving out pamphlets explaining why we were protesting. As a reaction, the Chavistas started to give out their own pamphlet. In theory, it should have been a mature and responsible act where they invited us to discuss and debate the subject. However, the pamphlet read, "Do not mistake yourselves. If you continue, we will come with our weapons." As noted, the levels of intolerance and polarization have risen to levels never seen before, becoming a serious danger to the present and future generations, where hatred and violence reign instead of peace and understanding. But the supporters of the government have not only threatened us, but they have taken action. About a year ago, as about 2,000 students left the Universidad Central de Venezuela to protest against a government policy that diminished the already precarious budget destined to public universities, the offices of the highest level student government, the Federación de Centros Universitarios, and 3 buses were all burnt with use of Molotov cocktails. The state has not yet investigated this case. Another case of violence inside my university occurred 6 months ago, when 5 heavily armed men with weapons ranging from handguns to submachine guns entered where I study, law school, looking for a student. The gunmen passed from classroom to classroom, aiming guns at teachers' heads, asking if that person studied in the room. After 10 minutes of havoc, the men left law school without the student and threw a gas bomb to cover their escape. The government has still not investigated this case, neither why civilians are in possession of gas bombs if Venezuelan law only permits the police and the army to acquire them. Similarly, no more than a month ago, a group of 5 hooded men entered the Universidad Central de Venezuela and shot at the windows of the headmaster's office and threw 2 Molotov cocktails inside. No investigations have still been done to solve this case. These are only cases that have occurred in my university, but similar events occur daily in other universities around Venezuela. Fortunately, I haven't been a victim of a physical attack, but a year ago I was harassed on the TV program that runs late at night on the government-owned channel. This program, called La Hojilla, or the razor blade, is meant to metaphorically open up the opposition and show who they really are. On January 13th of 2009, a 10-minute telephone conversation between David Smolansky, another student leader, and I was transmitted on national television, where we were ridiculed not only because we were members of the student movement, but also because we were Jewish. On the conversation, we both discussed the organization of protests for the following days in Caracas. As soon as the conversation ended, the host, Mario Silva, expressed the following: Scharifker and Smolansky, by the way, their surnames, if I'm not mistaken, are of Hebrew origin, Jewish. See, there are problems at this moment, not only with Palestine, but also with sectors of power. But I'm not saying that all the Jewish community, but sectors of power of the Jewish community that are at this moment are very unhappy with the position of the President of the Republic on the matter of defense of Palestinian sovereignty. And if that was enough, he continued, today I was searching for pictures of them Pictures to recognize them, to know who are the ones that are going to provoke protests, raising their hands and voices, creating conflicts on the streets. Unfortunately, he never found pictures of us. If not, I'm sure I wouldn't be able to be here speaking before you because I would be in jail or physically attacked by supporters of the regime. But that was a year ago. However, this Friday, as I was leaving Venezuela, what happened to me seemed straight out of Orwell's 1984. A few hours before leaving my home, I made a few phone calls to my family and friends to say goodbye. As I finished one of my conversations with a female friend, I heard a male voice tell me through the telephone, "Be careful." At first, I thought this was one of the weekly threats I get through unknown telephone calls. But what happened at the airport would better explain it. As I arrived at the airline counter to proceed with my check-in, a female National Guard began asking me where I was going and what was the reason of my trip. After answering her questions, she let me proceed with the check-in. As I exited the counter, a male National Guard, who I'm completely sure was there waiting for me, asked me for my passport and told me to follow him. He took me straight to the police headquarters inside of the airport and started asking me where I was going, what was the purpose of my trip, if I was a member of the student movement, and if I had a copy of my speech I was going to read today so he could read it. I'm completely sure he wasn't his. I really doubt the guard's intention was to give me tips on what to say today. Is this democracy? Does freedom of speech really exist in my country? One thing we know for sure, and have left clear to the government officials, and I am here today to ratify, is that we are not afraid. We are not intimidated by these actions, but rather stimulated by them. This type of bullying only motivates us to continue our fight for a free Venezuela. For young Venezuelans, politics has ceased to be a subject we only heard from our parents' conversations. Politics has become part of our daily lives. This has been translated and present not only in bigger mobilizations against abuses committed by a regime, but also with the youth participating as candidates in the next parliamentarian elections on September 26th. About 30 ex-student leaders, including Ricardo Sanchez and John Goycochea, have great possibilities to be elected as parliamentarians. There is a new generation, one that is determined to change the way politics has been historically carried out in my country, based on the principles of democracy, liberty, tolerance, and the respect for human rights. An anonymous quote that I really love represents us is the following. It's titled "The Rock." The distracted tripped over it. The violent used it as a projectile. The entrepreneur built with it. The farmer, tired, used it to rest. Drummond poetized. David slew Goliath. Michelangelo created beautiful sculptures. In all cases, the difference was not in the rock, but in the man. 2010 will be the same year for all of us around the world. But the generation of the bicentenary will continue fighting so that this year we can gain our second independence. Thank you.